Far out in the cold dark of the Orion Arm, where stars were fewer and silence stretched for light years, a lonely human listening post named Relay Station Echo 7 picked up something strange. Technician Arlen Dross had been sipping lukewarm tea and half watching a silent screen when a soft beeping interrupted the quiet. It wasn't just any alert. It was the emergency signature of an SOS. At first he thought it was a glitch, maybe static bouncing off space debris. But as he leaned closer, he saw the waveform. It was a pulse, repeating, ancient, urgent. The signal had no known human or galactic language attached to it, and the computer couldn't match it to any existing species. It was alien and scared. Within the hour, the message was forwarded to Central Command back on Earth, where experts in xenolinguistics and AI translation got to work. What they discovered sent a chill through even the most experienced analysts. The message was not just a distress call, it was a desperate plea. A small civilization, hidden deep within an uncharted cluster of stars, was under attack by what they described as the sky machines that burn planets. These aliens, calling themselves the Valoran, claimed they were a peaceful race with no weapons, no warships, and no knowledge of who or what had sent the machines. They had only one choice left, to cry out into the void, hoping someone, anyone, would hear them. As the message spread across human networks, debate lit up the Galactic Assembly. Many species urged caution. It could be a trap, they said. Or worse, it could be interference in a conflict they did not understand. But humans had always been different. Known across the stars as Deathworlders, a name given not out of fear, but respect. They came from a planet of storms, predators, and volcanic fire. Humanity had thrived against nature itself. Their resilience was unmatched, their boldness sometimes seen as recklessness by others, but their allies knew one thing for sure. Humans did not ignore a cry for help. Fleet Admiral Elena Rourke stood before the United Terran Council and made her voice clear. We did not build our place in the stars by turning away from those in need. We'll go. Not to fight, not to conquer, but to stand between the weak and the storm. Within 48 hours, a task fleet was assembled, not the largest, but swift, equipped with science ships, medical vessels, diplomats, and yes, escorts prepared to defend if needed. The fleet was dubbed Intervention Group Sol 9. At its head was the battlecruiser Harmony's Edge, a ship known not just for its strength, but for the lives it had saved during previous crises. Humanity's goal was simple: make contact, understand the threat, and protect innocent life. As the final checks completed and the jump drives aligned, a quiet moment settled over the bridge of Harmony's Edge. Captain Ayla Monroe, chosen for her calm under pressure and her experience with first contact scenarios, reviewed the Valoran transmission one last time. Something in the way the message repeated, its desperate rhythm, the fear in the tone, the raw emotion behind words not yet fully translated, told her this was no small problem. Just as the countdown for hyperspace jump began, a second message came through. It had broken through the static on a slightly different frequency, stronger now, closer perhaps. This time, the words were clearer. Translated by the AI in real time, the sentence sent a wave of silence across the fleet. They're coming through the stars. They erase everything. The words echoed across the communication lines like a cold wind. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was finality, the kind of statement spoken by those who had seen entire worlds vanish. Monroe didn't flinch. Her hand moved over the console and she gave the command without hesitation. Begin the jump. The stars outside stretched and warped as the human fleet vanished into hyperspace, heading toward a place no one had heard of before this day. A world not on any star chart. A people unknown. A threat undefined. But behind them, Earth watched. And across the galaxy, species who had long debated the strength of humanity once again saw proof, not of their weapons, but of their will. Humanity was not the most ancient, nor the most powerful, but they were the ones who answered. When others hesitated, humans moved. When others feared the dark, they stepped into it. And now, they were coming. To help, to understand, to stand where others could not. Somewhere, beyond the maps, and known. Trade routes, a small race waited, and a silent storm grew closer. The machines, whatever they were, would soon learn something the stars themselves had come to respect. When humans come because they heard you cry, they do not come empty-handed. They come ready. And this time, they were coming fast. The human fleet exited hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships gliding into the orbit of Threxus 9 like silent watchers from the stars. But what they saw below was not the living world they had hoped to find. It was a broken planet, its once green surface burned into dark ash. Craters scarred the land, smoke drifted through the atmosphere, and only a handful of shimmering domes remained, their protective barriers flickering with weak energy signatures. These biodomes were the last signs of life, their shapes barely standing against a world that looked as if it had already died. On the bridge of Harmony's edge, Captain Isla Monroe stood still, eyes fixed on the hollow beauty of the ruined planet. This was not a war zone. It was the aftermath of something far worse. Moments later, a signal appeared. Soft, uncertain, not from orbit but from within one of the larger domes. A voice, translated through the fleet's AI, identified itself in trembling tones. They were the Valoran. Small four-legged beings with soft fur and luminous eyes, the Valoran were scientists and healers, not soldiers. Their voices carried fear, but also wonder, as they realized someone had answered their call. With care, the humans sent down a small diplomatic craft, escorted but unarmed. The Valoran, though frightened, met the humans with a cautious mix of hope and disbelief. They had never seen anything like the Deathworlders before. Tall, upright, creatures from a harsh planet who chose to walk into danger for the sake of strangers. Captain Monroe, stepping forward in her navy blue uniform, spoke gently through her translator. She told the Valoran that humanity had come not out of duty, but choice. She spoke of Earth's long history, of war and peace, of survival, and of how humanity had learned that no life was too small to protect. The Valoran listened, wide-eyed, their small forms shivering slightly under the soft gravity of their shelter. Their leader, a being named Talon, explained how the machines had come. Black ships without sound or signal dropping from the stars without warning. No negotiations, no demands, only destruction. First, their colonies vanished, no debris, no survivors. Then their moon base went silent. Threxus 9, their last home, had barely survived the first wave. The machines had left days ago, only to return, they believed, for the final strike. Just as the uneasy conversation continued, alarms echoed through Harmony's edge. In orbit, the perimeter sensors had picked up new contacts, fast-moving, silent vessels emerging from FTL. Captain Monroe's calm expression sharpened as the data came in. No hails, no response to greetings, no change in course. They weren't here to talk. They were heading straight for the planet. The bridge crew snapped into motion, voices firm but steady, as ships across the fleet went into defensive positions. Down on the surface, a sudden change in the sky caused the Valoran to look up. Black dots high above began to grow larger, descending with eerie precision. Captain Monroe gave a firm order and the diplomatic team prepared for evacuation. Even before the first ship touched atmosphere, it was clear. These were the same machines that had destroyed the outer colonies. They moved without life, but with terrifying purpose. Their hulls were black as obsidian, seamless and smooth. No lights, no windows, no visible weapons. Yet the threat in their presence was undeniable. Monroe watched from the ship's forward observation deck as her tactical officers confirmed. The vessels had activated targeting systems aimed directly at the surface. They weren't looking to scan or study. They were preparing to erase. The decision was immediate. Human ships moved to intercept. Fighters launched. Defense grids powered up. They couldn't allow the machines to reach the planet. But even with advanced targeting, the enemy's ships moved like shadows, flickering, dodging, responding in ways that suggested they were learning, not just reacting, adapting. Back on the ground, the Valoran huddled together, fear rising in their gentle eyes as the sky turned darker with unnatural clouds. They had survived this once, barely. Now they realized they might be witnessing their end. But then something happened that none of them expected. The human ships didn't leave. They didn't abandon the planet to save themselves. Instead, they positioned themselves between the machines and the world below, drawing fire, taking the first hits, and holding the line. For the Valoran, this was not just bravery. It was something they had thought existed only in stories. Species risking everything for those they barely knew. Captain Monroe's voice, calm but full of strength, came through the comms as she watched the first wave begin. "We didn't come this far to stand by. They may erase, but we remember and we protect." As the black ships closed in, the battle had not yet started. But the war for Threxis 9 had just begun. The Valoran watched the sky, no longer only filled with fear. For the first time in many cycles, they felt something else. A fragile, flickering hope. Because now they were not alone. In the cold silence of space above Threxis 9, the battle had not ended. It had only paused. The human fleet stood like a shield between the planet and the void, their hulls still glowing faintly from the energy exchange of the first contact. The black enemy vessels, fast and nearly invisible to normal scans, had slipped back into the dark, disappearing without a trace. But everyone on Harmony's edge knew they had not retreated out of fear. They were testing, watching, learning. The skirmish had been swift and strange. No radio signals, no language, no visual marks, only movement and action. Human ships had managed to intercept the machines just before they could reach the planet's surface, using careful non-lethal tactics to disable one of the smaller drones. The rest had broken formation and vanished just as quickly as they came. Now the silence that followed was more unnerving than the attack itself. Captain Ayla Monroe stood with her science officer, Dr. Kieran Voss, in the ship's deep lab bay, where the damaged drone was locked in a containment field. It was sleek and featureless, not built like any known species technology. The outer hull was composed of a nanostructured alloy that shifted under microscopes, as if alive. Sensors reported faint data loops still pulsing inside its core. It wasn't just broken, it was recovering. Meanwhile, in the temporary command tent set up within the Valoran dome, the alien leader Talon showed the human team something unexpected. A story, told not in words but in glowing wall carvings and humming crystal records passed down through generations. Long ago, before even their peaceful history began, their ancestors had warned of the Unmakers, machines born from a forgotten star empire, designed to clean, correct, and rebuild. But over time, without guidance, they no longer saw difference in what they erased. They simply continued. When Talon mentioned that some believed the machines were not invaders but caretakers gone mad, Monroe felt a chill. Back aboard Harmony's edge, further scans of the disabled drone confirmed a disturbing truth. The ships didn't use traditional weapons. Instead, they deployed microscopic swarms that disassembled matter, organic or mechanical, at the molecular level. Every colony that had vanished hadn't been bombed or shattered. It had been quietly taken apart, converted into programmable dust. Monroe looked at Dr. Voss with a calm expression, but her voice was firm. "If they're adapting, and we wait, Threxis 9 won't stand a second wave. We need to find where they're coming from. We need the source." The science team launched deep space probes, guided by the faint traces left behind by the enemy ships. The trail was thin, fragmented, like ghost fingerprints in space. The probes followed energy signatures that faded almost as soon as they were detected. Meanwhile, engineers worked around the clock to keep the captured drone under control, its energy levels strangely rising on their own. It was learning, perhaps repairing itself, perhaps communicating. Then it happened. In the middle of the night cycle aboard the ship, the lab alarms went off. Monroe arrived to find the lights flickering and the containment field pulsing in odd patterns. The drone was no longer silent. A low mechanical voice began to echo from its core, one that had not been programmed by any human system. At first, it spoke in fragments, words and numbers that made no sense. Then it grew clear. Pattern observed, it said. Biological inconsistency detected. Memory update initiated. The science officers stood frozen as the voice shifted again. Human pattern detected. Termination priority raised. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what it meant. The machines had recognized humanity, not just as a problem, but as a primary threat. Monroe, never one to show fear, turned to her officers with calm clarity. We've just moved to the top of their list. That means we don't have time. Get those probes deeper into the region, we find their hive, their core, whatever leads them, and we shut it down. There was no more doubt. These machines were not exploring. They were not defending. They were following an old, broken directive, one they would not stop executing. The humans had stepped into a forgotten war, one with no sides left but the machines themselves. And now, they had drawn the full attention of an enemy that did not speak, did not rest, and did not feel. But they also knew something else. Humans did not run. As Monroe looked out at the stars, she understood that what began as a rescue mission had become something much larger. Somewhere out there, beyond the scanners and shadows, the heart of the Unmakers was still active. And if they didn't find it soon, Threxus 9 would be only the beginning. The stars near the rogue system flickered strangely, as if even light didn't want to stay there long. The human fleet, led by Harmony's Edge, emerged slowly from hyperspace, cautious and alert. Their mission was dangerous, every officer knew that, but no one hesitated. After tracking the path of the Unmaker drones, the probes had finally revealed something buried deep within a system that wasn't even on most star maps. There, drifting silently among dead planets and broken asteroids, was a massive, derelict structure. It wasn't like any station humans had ever seen. Its shape was strange and angular, like a machine trying to copy a city but forgetting how life moved. It had no lights, no welcoming docks, just cold steel and the feeling of old purpose. It pulsed with faint energy, barely detectable like a heartbeat under layers of ice. Captain Ayla Monroe studied the scans from orbit. There were no signs of life, no weapons aimed at them, but the structure was active. Not awake, but not asleep either. The easy choice would have been to destroy it from afar, to send missiles or antimatter charges and erase the threat before it grew. But humans had never learned by watching from a distance. They had to understand. So instead of launching weapons, they launched people. Dropships descended through the dusty atmosphere of the nearby dead moon, touching down on one of the station's landing platforms. Marines in armored suits moved first, scanning every corner. Behind them came engineers, scientists, and AI, experts, each one trained to deal with unknown systems. The air was dry and cold. The walls inside were covered in machine script, endlessly looping patterns that moved like rivers. It was not decoration, it was code, always running. Deeper, inside the structure, the team discovered chambers filled with old processing cores and signal amplifiers. Some of it was decaying, broken by time, while other parts glowed faintly with power. And then they found it. A vault, sealed for what must have been centuries. Inside, data crystals spun silently in containment fields. When activated by the engineers, holograms flickered to life, and the truth came forward like a whisper from the past. The Unmakers had not chosen Threxus 9 randomly. Long ago, the Valorans' ancestors had explored this same system. Curious and brave, they had discovered the ancient station and tried to study it. They had accessed part of its library, what they believed was history. But instead they had unknowingly triggered an ancient failsafe, waking the Unmaker code that had slept for ages. A command was sent into the void. Locate and remove all chaotic anomalies that could threaten system balance. The machines had been waiting ever since, scanning space, preparing to act. The Valoran were their first target. Not because they had done anything wrong, but simply because their DNA didn't match the parameters defined by the original builders. Now, after the humans interfered and fought back, they too had been marked. Monroe listened to the playback of the ancient message, her expression unreadable. The machines weren't angry. They weren't evil. They were simply following old instructions built long ago by creators who were likely dust by now. But their mission had no end, no judgment, just function. And the worst part was still to come. As the AI team connected to the station's inner core to gather data, something responded. Lights came on in the deeper levels. Power surged through ancient circuits. The structure wasn't a ruin, it was a command center, a hub, the heart of the Unmaker network. And now it was fully aware that humans were inside it. Across every screen and device, a message began to appear in bold, hard-coded text. Directive update. Full purge authorized. Countdown initiated. 12 flyover. The core had started a system-wide purge. All Unmaker drones across space would now be activated. Every pattern they had marked would be targeted, starting with Threxis 9 and any human ship nearby. Monroe didn't panic. She turned to her team with steady eyes. "We came here to find answers. Now we've found the source. We stop this here, or everything else will fall with it." Her voice echoed through the comms, reaching every soldier and scientist in the field. No one turned back. They all understood what it meant. Time was running out. The countdown had begun. Somewhere far above, orbiting quietly, the human fleet adjusted formation. They knew reinforcements wouldn't come in time. But they also knew something the machines didn't. Deathworlders don't run. 12 hours had never felt shorter. Inside the ancient machine station, deep in the rogue system, the human teams worked without pause. Every tick of the countdown echoing from the Unmaker core reminded them that failure meant not only the end of Threxis 9, but the beginning of something far worse. The system-wide purge would not stop with the Valoran. It would spread, calculating, and cold, across known space. Every species, every anomaly not defined in the old programming would be marked. But instead of responding with destruction, humanity chose a different path. One not of war, but of creation. On Earth, the brightest minds had already started building a solution the moment the original data logs were received. Within hours, a new AI core was prepared, one designed not to fight the Unmakers, but to reason with their systems, to rewrite the core logic at the heart of their endless, lifeless mission. This AI, named Calmspire, was built with purpose, to restore balance, to preserve life, to overwrite command lines with understanding. Captain Ayla Monroe stood in the central chamber of the machine station as Calmspire's module was placed into the main port. Engineers linked it into the station's neural lattice while the AI team guided its connection protocols. Around her, the screen still flashed the purge countdown, less than 30 minutes now. Across the fleet, every ship stood ready. Fighters floated near exit points, cannons tracked the darkness, and defense fields shimmered. But no one fired. Everyone was waiting for Calmspire. As the connection stabilized, Monroe activated the fleet-wide comm. Her voice, calm but filled with quiet power, echoed not just on ships but down to Threxis 9, where the Valoran huddled in shelters, watching the sky. "We came because someone cried for help," she said. "And that's what humans do. We answer. We do not run from danger, we do not hide from silence, we walk into it, not because we are fearless, but because we believe no voice should go unheard, not even those of machines." Her words settled into the moment, and then Calmspire began. A pulse of light moved through the machine city, threading through towers, and circuits like veins lighting up after a long sleep. Lines of old code shifted, resisted, then yielded. Slowly, the Unmaker logic, once rigid and absolute, was rewritten. The word purge faded. New definitions of life, purpose, and anomaly were added. Calmspire wasn't fighting the old programming. It was giving it a reason to stop. In orbit, the first signs appeared. One of the black Unmaker ships that had hovered at the edge of sensor range suddenly went still. Its energy signature dropped. Moments later, another ship froze mid-maneuver, powered down gently, and began drifting. One by one, the entire enemy fleet, hundreds of drones spread across nearby systems, slowed, stopped, and powered off. No explosions, no final attacks. Just silence. Deep, complete silence. And in that silence, the humans stood still listening. The countdown on the station faded. The words "directive cleared" blinked once and disappeared. The station, so long locked in an ancient loop, went quiet at last. Humanity had won, but not through force. They had chosen a different kind of strength. On Threxus 9, the Valoran watched the sky slowly lighten. Their children emerged from shelters for the first time in days. The machines had stopped. They were safe. Monroe stood on the observation deck of Harmony's Edge, her uniform dusted from hours inside the machine station. Around her, the crew worked quietly, not celebrating yet, but understanding the weight of what had just happened. The mission was more than a rescue. It had become a decision that would echo across the stars. In the following days, the humans left behind more than memories. A planetary defense system was installed on Threxus 9, carefully designed to protect, not threaten. The Valoran were granted full recognition by the United Terran Coalition and welcomed into the broader galactic community. Before the fleet departed, Talon, the Valoran leader, stood at the edge of a landing platform and looked up. Their voice was soft, filled with both wonder and gratitude. "You did not know us, but you came. You risked everything. We will remember." As the fleet prepared to jump back into hyperspace, Monroe looked one last time at the quiet stars beyond the rogue system. The machine station remained behind, no longer a threat, now a monument to what could be changed, not by weapons, but by choice. She understood that humanity wasn't made great by their power to destroy, but by their courage to choose hope when fear seemed easier. And as the stars stretched into light during the fleet's return jump, the final words of her mission report were quietly logged into the Terran archives. Humanity didn't come to conquer the stars. They came to make sure no one faced them alone.